Hey, what's up? It's Sidechain and I'm back with another video. Today we're going to talk a little bit about sidechain. And sidechaining is a very important technique in most electronic music genres, and it's used to make a little bit more space for the kick, because your kick usually is like very loud and upfront, the loudest element in your mix. So you need to give it some space and breathing to really punch through. I've prepared a little project here. So we have a basic kick sample loaded up here, which sounds like this. Okay, and then I have made different channels with the different sidechain techniques. On all these channels there's the same like sub. It's a basic sine wave sub here. You can just take a little listen. So it's just a basic sine wave sub in the key of F. The kick is also in the key of F. And now we'll compare the different techniques, and I will show you the up and downs of each technique. And we will start off with the compressor technique, which is the most common technique. Everybody who is talking about sidechain usually talks about sidechain compression. So I've loaded up a compression device here and set up the sidechain. And yeah, the audio signal coming into the sidechain is the ghost trigger. And we will talk about that later. First of all, we want to check out how it works. I think most of you are aware of the concept and know how it works. We just use the compressor, use external sidechain input signal, and then the sub is sidechained to the kick signal. So when the kick hits, the volume of the sub channel goes down, and we will get some space to breathe for the kick. And we have different settings here. The most important settings in the sidechain compression are usually like the attack, the release, and the threshold. And I will also show you a very important part here in this compressor to use, how you can improve your sidechain, and that's the EQ section here, because it's very helpful sometimes if you use a sidechain compressor, because if you have a like really big kick, a big long kick, you have a lot of times the problem that the kick is stucking the signal for such a long time that the sidechain actually gets too long. And usually you just need an input signal which is triggering the side chain with every downbeat on every kick hit, and not for a very long time. You just need a trigger, and then you set up the sidechain length by using the release knob. And I will show you basically how it works. So if we have the sub signal here, we can use the headphone button, so then we can listen to the input signal here coming in. And you can see I've set it up like this, so that it's a very short transient, which is triggering the sidechain, and then I do all the setup and the length of the sidechain with the release setting. And I can show you also how the release setting will impact the result. And so I will turn the headphone button off. You can use anything. Basically the most common setting here is to just high pass the signal and reduce the very, very low end, and just get the click and the click transient of the kick, and use that as a trigger. You can also do it like this with a ghost trigger. You can use your sample. You can use any sample. You can also use a hi-hat or just a percussion. You can just need a very short transient, put it on every kick hit, and then use that as a sidechain input signal. So this is how it looks like. You can easily see it here, the curve And now check it out. Let's see how it changes when I turn the release up and down. So yeah, you can see the longer the release, the longer the sidechain ducking, and so you really have to make sure that the timing here is perfectly matching your kick, so that the final result looks very smooth, and the tail of the kick matches with the sub, and you don't have a lot of up and downs in the amplitude of the low frequencies, and you have a really like stable and solid foundation for your track. And I will turn on the channel here so you can see how both signals add up. And here you can see the first issue of the compressor is that you don't have a lot of settings. You can just set the release time and the attack time, and you have two different options for the release envelope. You can use linear or logarithmic, which are both a little bit different in the the look of the curve, how the release is going back to zero, and we can try out both to see how they are different. So it just, you can see it here that it looks a little bit different, and you can try it out. Sometimes one works better than the other, but we have a little issue here. You can see that when the kick and the subtail are overlapping, we get a little bump here in volume, and it's it's going up and down a little bit. So that's, for example, here sometimes it's not easy to really get it matched perfectly because you just have not enough options on the compressor to really set it up. You can, of course, you can tweak it a little bit more, then it will probably get a little bit better, but you still have the problem with some kick samples which have a complex tail. It's hard to get the sub matching the curve of your tail from the kick. And that's one of the downsides of the compressors. Another downside is that sometimes it introduces artifacts, especially if the attack time is very short. Sometimes you get a little click, and you have to just try it out. And yeah, sometimes you get artifacts also at the end of the sidechain, because then the kick already hits, and if the compressor is not fast enough and closing down, sometimes get some weird artifacts. So that's one of the downsides also of the compressor. But still, the compressor is the most used tool for sidechaining, because I think it was also the first tool which was ever used for doing sidechain. Okay, then we'll go to the next kind of technique, which is using an EQ for sidechaining. And using an EQ for sidechaining is not that common, and as also has some big downsides, and it can get problematic. We can, for example, try to set up the FabFilter Pro Q3 for sidechaining. I've just made here a low shelf ducking by the full range of 30 dB, and I've used also the ghost trick as a sidechain input, and let's see how it works. Yeah, you can see also we have the bump here, and then it goes a little bit down and then up again. So the problem is that, for example, in this FabFilter EQ, we don't have a lot of controls. We can just set the threshold, but the problem is we don't have attack and release time, and so it's very hard to set the exact release time so that the tails are really matching. And that's why it's not that common. And some Dynamic EQs do have the options for settings for setting the attack and release, and then it's a little bit easier. But we will see the biggest downside of using an EQ in the next example when we use the Track Spacer plugin. A lot of people probably already know that. So let's see how this looks like. And here we can see that it gets problematic. If you really look at the part where the kick and the sub first are overlapping, the volume is getting ducked down, and this is not because of the sidechain, and that's because of the phase shift from the EQ. The problem here is that every EQ does shift the phase, except if you're using linear phase EQs. And this can get problematic, especially in low frequencies, where it's really necessary that the phase of the signals are both lined up. And is exactly the phase is exactly the same, because otherwise, if you're out of phase, you will get like cancellations like we have here, and that's a problem, and especially in low frequencies, that's really obvious. And that's why I personally would not recommend to use EQ for sidechaining low frequencies. If you're sidechaining like high frequencies or mid frequencies to get some like space for your vocal, for example, then it's okay, because in that kind of frequency bands, the phase correlation is not that important as it is in very low frequencies. And that's the biggest downside in my opinion, and we can also see it here. I've loaded up the plugin doctor just to show it to you. If I've set it here to phase, and if we use then low shelf here, you can see that it introduces a phase shift here, and that's actually what causes the problem, because as the signal gets shifted in the phase, the correlation does not match the phase of the kick anymore, and that's when you have these kind of like weird effects where you see the amplitude of the signal going down when they both are overlapping each other. And that's why I would not recommend it for low frequencies. For like mid and high frequencies, you can use it, but for sidechaining kick and bass, I would not recommend it. And here we come to the my personal favorite of sidechaining tools, and that's the volume shaper. This is, in my opinion, the easiest and most versatile tool. It's very simple, and the biggest advantage is that you can just draw in the curve for the sidechain manually, and with compressors are big issues. A lot of people don't really understand how compression works, so it's very hard for them to set up their sidechain correctly, and they don't really know how the attack and release timing and everything works. So it's a little bit tricky, especially for beginners, but the volume shaper is really easy. Everybody just gets what it's doing. You have just this GUI here, and you can just draw in the curve how you want to duck the signal. And so it's very versatile, because you can really go deep in and draw the curve how you want it, and you can draw a very complex curve which are impossible to recreate with a compressor. And for example, if we look like we can listen how this one sounds like. So you can see we have a little bit of same issue as with the compressor, that we have a little bump in here when they first overlap. And now you can really draw in, if you want to, and if it's really needed, a complex curve which is not possible to recreate with a compressor. So you can see we have a very stable signal. The volume is not jumping up and down. It's like very stable, but please always listen to it as well, and don't do it just with your eyes on the oscilloscope. Also listen to it, because sometimes it's not guaranteed that if it looks right, it also sounds right. But it's just for presentation purposes, to show you that you can really draw complex curves, and it works well. And that's the one of the biggest advantages of the volume shaper, that it's easy to understand and you can draw in any curve you want to really fit your kick perfectly. And I've just made another channel here which uses not a sine wave bass, and instead like typical techno rumble bass made with my kick rumble rack, and it sounds like this. So yeah, you have the typical like delay reverb based rumble without distortion and a low pass. And now we can also use the shaper box again to match it perfectly to our kick sample. Yeah, so as I already said, volume shaper, very easy to use, easy to set up, and you can also do it with a utility plugin. Basically, we can just do that quickly. So if you don't want to spend any money on plugins, that's fine. It's not really necessary. We can try that out with some of the channels here. So what I will do is I will just use the utility plugin, and then we can just draw in some automation. Just for example, get the idea. Of course, you have to set it up correctly then. Just do it quick for demoing it. For example, it could look like this. So that's the basic concept. So you can even use a utility plugin, draw in an automation curve. You don't have to spend a lot of money for plugins. You can also use the ones you already have. It's no problem. Of course, it's a little bit more tricky, but it's still possible to do it like this. But the last example I wanted to show you is using a multiband sidechain, and the main advantage is basically when you're sidechaining a signal, you want to duck out the frequencies which are getting into the way of the kick drum, and usually that's the low frequencies, because low frequencies take up a lot of space, and that's why you have to duck them away a little bit more. And if you have like very high frequencies, have maybe like some drums or percussions, you don't have to sidechain them as much as audio with very low frequencies. And that's why multiband sidechain can be very handy. I'm using the shaper box here again, and here you can set up to 3 different bands. And the cool thing is then you can use the solo button here to listen just to that signal, and we can just try it out. Okay, first let it play the whole loop. I've just loaded up a synth loop here for demonstration purposes. So the cool thing is you can select the band you want, and then you can set up the sidechain differently for each band. For example, we can just listen to the low band here. And you can really match it to each band individually. And here in the high frequencies, you can hear if I do it at 100% dry wet, then it's a little bit too much. The high frequencies get ducked all the time, or at least for this amount of time in the curve, but it's a little bit too much, and for very high frequencies they don't take up a lot of space, so you not necessarily have to duck it all the way down to 0, and that's why I use a dry wet control here to just dial in maybe 50, 60, 70% of the ducking shape, and so a little bit still gets through, and in this way it's a little bit more transparent and you have not that much ducking on the high frequencies. And that's why I use the multiband feature a lot when I do my sidechaining, especially for like synths and drums, so that I don't sidechain the high frequencies as much as I do sidechain the low frequencies. And we can listen to that in the full context. I just set up here the mix knob again. I fucked up something here, yeah. So yeah, hopefully you understand what I mean and why I prefer the volume shaping technique. And yeah, I hope you learned something. If you want to know something else, just leave a comment and I will answer all the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next tutorial. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.